Are you ready?
Yes.
Okay. Hi, I'm Nancy Steele, like she said, and I am living in Tennessee. My background for 17 years, I worked as a teacher of the deaf and hard of hearing in Kentucky. And while I was in there, I got into deaf blindness and really worked with several deaf-blind kids along the way, and just found it to be a wonderful place to just live for a while. So I did that for many years, and then I decided I needed to get out of teaching because I just felt like it was time to go, and I went to work for the National Center on Deaf Blindness, and I worked there for about 15 years. And in that, I got to go out and be in all kinds of different states. I mainly, the first part of that, I worked in like 7 states in the Southeast. And whatever that deafblind project was doing was what we would use our focus. That would be our focus, and we would do different things. But mostly, I ended up in classrooms and doing a lot of TA and teaching them how to do classroom TA and working with kids. And any chance I got an opportunity to go down into classrooms and just lay hands on kids every once in a while, I always did that because it always reminded me of what I was supposed to do and why I was there and what it really means, you know. And I always kind of kept that as part of my background just because I felt like if I knew how to use this touch, that I really wanted to keep that touch intact. I wanted to make sure that I still had that, and I still to this day, even though I'm old and it takes a lot to get down the floor, I still like to get down in the floor and really work and interact with kids and just see what they have. I do a lot around communication and a lot around literacy. So touch and today's topic is absolutely part of all of this. So we'll get into this right now. In getting into it, um, why is it not moving? I don't know why there it is. In getting into this presentation, when Donna asked me a few months back if I would do this, I was like, she wanted me to talk about hand under hand. And I said, well, I don't know if I can do that for 2 hours, but I can certainly talk about it for a long time, but I can't do it without really talking about just the sense of touch. And whenever I'm asked to do anything like this, I always play with it in my head for a while. I dance all around it. I have to think about it from all different angles. And then I have to self-stem a while. And then I sit down and write down notes here and there as, you know, during those months that I'm preparing. And then I really don't sit down and think hard about it and get into it until a few days before. So last week I started really looking at the calendar and thinking, all right, it's coming. I've really got to think about this. And it wasn't coming. The flow wasn't there and it wasn't kicking in. And sometimes that happens to me and it really makes me stressed out. It's just part of my creative process or whatever. But I just kept going, what's wrong with me? Why can't I kick this in? And then it occurred to me. Number one, we're talking about touch, and that's such an intimate topic. And we're doing this virtually, which is so off the beaten path for me. It's just like, there's the first part. And then the other piece is because of COVID and just not using our sense of touch with others like we have been. And so I want to start this session off today about us all, because I thought, well, if I'm feeling this way, then maybe others are feeling that way. And I just want us to think about your sense of touch, not anybody else's, but your own. Because see, we usually take for granted this sense of touch. Because we are sighted, because we do have all our senses intact, then we learn touch a different way than our learners with deaf blindness. But I want to talk about our sense of touch first, because I feel like if we don't think about our own sense of touch today, and we don't really get in touch with our sense of touch, that we're not doing a service to these kids. All right, so the first thing I want, this is where I first, and I got into the shower when I first started thinking about, oh, I've really got to do this. What am I going to do? And so I thought, well, maybe I'll start with the shower. So I got in the shower. Now you think about how that sense of touch, your sense of touch, think about how that feels in a shower. Think about how that water, that warm water, and how you turn your body in different ways. And then all of a sudden that warm water is on your back. And at first, you know, if you've got it a little hot, that you kind of, and then you, when you turn and get that, you're back into that water. Or you let it go down your face and you got it all the way all over your body. So that sense and that first, that warmness, and what that does to just make your sensory system, your whole body go, now I'm going to take you to diving into a cool pool, a cold pool. And where I grew up, we had this little country club kind of place, and it was up in the mountains, and they didn't really have a heater in our pool. So what we would have to do as a kid, we'd all love going to the pool in the summer, but we'd go to the pool and we'd have to dive in because it was ice cold, and then jump back out, dry off, and then go back in the pool, and it kind of got our sensory systems kind of cleared out, and so that our bodies could take that cold temperature. But thinking about that sense of touch, that sense of your whole body being immersed in that coldness and what it would do to you. Now think about when you hold a baby, and their sense of touch when you've got their hands there and you're holding, and maybe you're touching their cheek. Maybe you're holding on to their hand a little bit. Think about how your hands, your fingers feel as you're stroking the back of their head, or maybe you're just touching them and caressing them, and how good that feels to your body, how we really enjoy just holding a baby, and that baby snuggles into you, and just how calming that is for them and as for you. And as a grandmother, I haven't been able to see my grandkids in the last year. And so that I really miss that peace, that sense, that holding. Although all of my grandkids are up at a bigger age now and not that little baby age, I still very much remember that, and I still very much, think about from time to time how that touch, that feels to us. Then what if somebody is walking down the street with you and you grab them to get them out? They're going to they're going to walk in front of a car, and you grab them and push them back. What does your sense of touch do then? How do you feel that? You've got more control in there. That's really strong. You're using your muscles. You're trying to keep them from getting hurt. Quite different from holding a baby, right? But still able to use your hands in those ways. What about a massage? Now, everybody, I hope at this time, and by the way, it's also very hard to do this kind of a thing when I can't see you and I don't know if you're asleep or if I'm saying anything that makes any sense. So if you want to put stuff in the chat pod, it wouldn't hurt my feelings at all. So that massage, let's get back to that. And think about when you get a massage and just how that feels to your body, your skin, your whole sensory system just relaxes into it. What kind of pressure do you like? Some people like really dark, hard, intense pressure. Others, not so much. They just want that just smoothing out, light touch. So all of those different kinds of touches that can be done. A lot of our kids, when we're trying to build a relationship with them, we'll use massage. Maybe we'll massage their hands or their feet to kind of get them to where they're really getting to that relationship with us and trusting us. So we might use massage in different ways, and lotions and different stuff with our kids with deaf blindness. And that really helps that sensory system. That helps with that sense of touch. But think about how that does for you. It's very soothing. It's very relaxing. Then what about different kinds of handshakes? You know, when you get somebody who really gives you a good firm handshake, or what about those limp noodle people that just kind of hand it to you and you're like, or cold, clammy, you know, that kind of handshake that's just kind of, and you automatically want to draw back because their hands are cold, or they're kind of limp or whatever, or maybe they embrace your hand too hard and it hurts, so you pull back. What about cleaning out something that's gross? You know, like, I don't know, think about when you're cleaning out a nasty bowl from whatever you've had at supper, or something that you have to clean out and use your hands, and how it's sticky, or it's kind of slimy or gross, and think about how your hands like, oh, at first, and then you just dive in and it's cold and slimy and all over. But that's a different texture. Then digging in sand, think about how that feels to your hands. All of these things are things that we've done, typing and writing, everything that touching that hot stove, and just how it makes you draw back. I burnt my finger last night and it was like, oh, that hurts. But, you know, what about that first time you did it, and teaching somebody else to do it? And then the last one I have up here is that hug from someone you haven't seen in a long time. We did sneak back in about June or July of last year and got some grandkids down here. And as we did, one of my grandsons came here and he raced, and he's not a particularly huggy, touchy kind of guy. And he raced over towards me and just clung to me and just held on and hugged and hugged and hugged. I mean, it went on for like about 3 or 4 minutes, to the point where I was like, well, it's good to see you too, sweetie. But he really, it's that hug, it's that touch, it's that embrace, it's those kind of things that mean so much to us because we attach so many memories to it. We can't talk about touch without thinking about our attitudes towards touch. And we have to think about how touch, you know, as I talked about all those ones that we just went through, all of those different textures and all of those different memories that you have of touching. You have to, before you start working really with kids with deaf blindness, or you really have to stop and think about your own attitude towards touch, because it makes a difference. You know, it's not something that we think about ordinarily, but we have to also remember our beliefs have been shaped because we had intact senses. We don't use our hands. We use our hands more like tools than we do in terms of searching or really wanting to know things. We rely on our vision and our hearing and our other senses more so than our touch, than our sense of touch. So we have to stop and think about and really ask yourself about how you feel about being touched or touching. You know, a lot of it is cultural. I was talking to a friend of mine and she was saying something about, oh, well, in America, we don't touch each other, and we're very, you know, standoffish. And I'm thinking, well, where do you live? Because in the South, we hug each other all the time. We're very much hands-on and touchy-feely, a lot of us, but different people have different ways of using touch, or even thinking about touch or wanting to be touched. So some of it is cultural, some of it is how you were brought up, and it's very cultural. It's what happens around you. Some of it has to do with your age. Um, since I'm 62, I'm a little bit older, and we were much more. I remember as my grandparents, my great grandparents, my parents, everybody was more lovey and holding and hugging and much more hands-on than now that I'm seeing in younger cultures, not as much touching and stuff. So there's a cultural thing in age. There's also the communication. Some of us, I use my hands all the time when I'm talking. Some of it has to do with signing for years, but a lot of it has to do with just who I am and how I express myself. I use my hands a lot. So in communication, I use it. We also have to think about space in New York when you're in those subways and how close proximity everybody is, and they're used to being touched. You all in the Maryland area, some of you in the more DC area may have more of that kind of where you're around people, and in metro systems when you're riding the metro or whatever, then and walking down the street than you are if you live out in the country. So all of that has something to do with your attitude towards touch, and thinking about that. Also, just gender and general sexuality. All of those things come into play. There's also those, when you use your sense of touch, you relay feelings and emotionals. Think about when someone comes to you after the death of someone and you cling onto their hands and you're talking to them about how you're so distraught over losing your loved one or whatever. Your hands are shaking maybe, and you really use them. They really show a different emotional state. Or if you're just exhausted and your feelings really come out in your sense of touch. A lot of kids with deaf blindness, or kids even with blindness, will be, when they touch you, they can tell what your state is, what your emotional state. They can see when you're having a bad day, or, oh, you're having a good day, and it's through your touch. We don't think about that. We don't think about all of the things that we relay through our sense of touch, and how much we can receive and how much we do receive through touch, only because we're using our other senses to gather information and not relying as much. So what I'd love for you to do this evening, sometime in the next few days, is really think about your sense of touch, how you use it. I would suggest that you shut your eyes as you're doing an activity that you are very well versed in: washing your face, brushing your teeth, washing the dishes, whatever. Stop, shut your eyes, shut everything else out, and just really use that time and think about your touch and what you're feeling, how you do that, what information you're picking up, how you're picking up that information. All of that sensory system and how you use it. Then the last part of that is just that memory. When we talk about different memories and what it applies to touch, I worked with a child not too long ago that I didn't know her very well at all, and I was down on the floor with her, and she and I were doing a blowing game where I was playing with her. She had her feet up in the air, and she was doing that. So I had them, and I was kind of blowing on them and laughing and just trying to, get a rapport going, getting an interaction back and forth going on. And all of a sudden, she kept raising her shirt up. She was lying down on her back, and she kept raising her shirt up. And she had a G-tube, and I had a bunch of people in the room who were watching our interactions. So I was kind of talking to them, but also playing with her. And as I was doing that, she kept raising it up. And all that kept going through my mind is, oh, what if she pulls out that G-tube? I do not need that right now. I just don't. So I kept pulling her shirt down until I realized that as I was blowing on her feet, as we were playing that game, she recalled and remembered that her mom would do that same blowing on her belly. And so she was remembering that and trying to tell me, hey, this is what I know about that game, and it's kind of fun. And it wasn't until we asked mom, and her mom said, well, yeah, we do play that game a lot. But it's that touch, it's that tactile memory that sometimes we miss out if we don't know about it. And we've got to think about, when you see kids, they very much will remember that touch, that memory of that touch and what it felt like and why. So it's very important that we foster that and we make that connection with them if at all possible. It was wonderful to make that connection and to know, oh, this is what you meant. That was so powerful for her. That was so powerful for her to be able to let me know, hey, I've played this game before and I like this game. It's a fun game. But we have to know about those memories, and we have to know about thinking about that these kids come with memories, and we have to, they're trying to put those memories together to form concepts. And those concepts are developed through touch and through those kind of games and those experiences and such. Okay, so our skin is very much the way that it's our largest organ in the body. Excuse me there. It's our largest organ of the body. It provides the boundary for our bodies. And it's very much a part of our body image and how we think of ourselves. You think about our kids with deaf blindness, though, they don't have that body image, memory, and thought process. That's not there because they haven't seen what that really looks like. They've not been able to go to that mirror and look at it and stuff. And then your skin is also just part of an active information system. It perceives sensations such as that pain or temperatures, vibration, pressure. It gives us so many different signals about what's going on in our world and what's around us. It's the major one that pulls information in, although other than our eyes and our ears. So our skin is very much a part of just knowing what's happening and how we're supposed to interact and be around different things. When we have the sense of touch, we have several different things that we need to think about when you're using your touch. Is it your whole body? Maybe it's parts of your body. When I'm working with kids, when I first start working with kids, when I first go in to meet kids, I don't start with their hands necessarily. I'm going to start possibly with their shoulder, because that part of the body is not as sensitive. Your hands are so sensitive, and a lot of our kids won't let you have their hands. A lot of our kids are still in this stage. I've done a lot of reading up on and thinking about touch in the last few weeks. And I was reading some stuff that Barbara Miles wrote about, and she talked about newborns are like this. They're up here, and they stay up here. And if you think about newborns, and when they're born and they're laid out, they're like this, and their bodies are close up, and their hands are up like this. Then as they see things, as they start getting more awareness of their body, then their arms start going from here to the midline to grasp something, to get something, to touch something, and then it moves out from there. So their hand development, their arm development, all of those things happen. A lot of our kids with deaf blindness, because of the vision, and because of vision, that's why we reach out. That's what motivates us. That's what motivates us to use our bodies to crawl, to get something, because we see something across the room and we want it. So we're going to go across and get it. So that sense of touch, when we aren't using our eyes to use, then we not necessarily reaching out to get things. So a lot of our learners with deaf blindness are going to keep their arms up here. And if you think about it, you see a lot of those kids that will keep them kind of close and up against them and not really give you a whole lot of that. We've got to teach them how to reach out, teach them how to be curious. When we think about touch, I'm going to go back to this, and then parts of that body. When I greet somebody for the first time, especially, but others, depending on the kid, I'm going to start here because this isn't as sensitive. This just isn't as sensitive. And then depending on if their arms, if their hands are, if they're willing to let me go down to their hands, then I may go down. I'm going to use a pretty firm touch, not a severe, but I'm not going to use light touch, because you know how light touch will make you just want to back off and smack somebody if they come up against you. So I'm not going to use that. I'm going to use kind of a firm touch to let them know. And then I'm going to go down their arm. If not, if that's not accessible, a lot of times kids will use their feet instead of their hands. That might be their sensory system. I've run across, especially during COVID, and I'm doing a lot of work with teams and in Zoom rooms, and we're talking about kids and that kind of stuff. And I've known several kids that they won't let you go near their hands, but if you look, as soon as they get into a building, as soon as they're possibly can, they throw off their shoes and socks and they rely on their feet. That's the same as using their hands. They're using their feet to gather that information instead of their hands, because their hands are too sensitive. They just can't handle it. I would, if I'm you, I would work very hard and long with my OT and have them help you to realize just how that student uses their hands, how they're using that sense of touch, what you can do to work with them to get them to a place where they can use their hands. If not, I start at the feet. That's where I start my communication. I've been known to sign in kids' feet before and work my way up their body instead of down through their arms, because that's not an option. That's being respectful to them. That's letting them know, hey, I understand you don't want me here, but I see that you've got this opening. I'm going to use that as an opening to get in so that I can start interacting and getting that sense and that connection with them. Then with touch also, it's someone or something touching you is quite different than you touching someone or something. You know, when you initiate it, then you are ready and prepared for the most part, because we do have our vision. I know that I can pick up my cup of coffee. I know what it's going to feel like, and I know how. And I know how much pressure I need to give. If someone touches me, then it's different. Now, am I going to bristle? Am I going to maybe pull away a little bit because I don't know this person? If they're coming in for a big bear hug and it's like, oh, we are in COVID, wait a minute, you know, that's made a difference in us thinking about our touch, I think. And I think it will be a different thing too. I can't talk today without talking about COVID. And when we get our learners back in, some of you may have your kids back in school, some of you don't. But when we get them back in, I think we're going to have to start over on a lot of things and really be respectful of this sense of touch and how much we just dive in. And, you know, we're going to have to maybe stop and think about that. We're going to stop and think about all of how we're going to take a couple of giant steps back and start with that trusting relationship. We've got to build that. And that starts with, and you get there with touch. You certainly absolutely do. But I think with COVID and the lack of touch and being around people and doing things, this is going to be something that we really do have to stop and take notice and think about as we move forward. Okay, so touch is our first language. It was our first language, our first social sense. You think about your mamas held you closely, and that was the very first thing. That was, they were talking, you didn't understand it, but you knew by the way they caressed you, by the way they held you, by the way they fed you, changed your diaper, put you in bed, all of those different things. It was all through the sense of touch. So that was our first language. And then you think about, fast forward, let's think about our kids with deafblindness or multiple disabilities, those guys that didn't start out that way with mama holding them, but yet they were in the NICU with all those tubes and everything else, and people coming in and acting on their bodies in a way to save their lives. But that sense of touch is quite different than what a mama would give her newborn, right? So you have to stop and think about where our learners have come from, what has been their prior experience with touch, what is the difference that they have, what are the different ways. And then it also provides just means of contact with the world. It's the way that we go through the world and we figure out things. We always learn more by doing, right? We learn when we use our hands, when we use our sense of touch. It helps us with contact with the world. It helps us to understand the world more. And then our strong connection with emotions and touch. We just have so many things, and think about how we use the word touch. It's kind of funny how we've used that word to mean so many things, like staying in touch and keeping in touch, and let's touch bases, and touch down even, and just I need to touch this, or don't touch. All of the different ways that touch is used in our language, but all the different meanings. So touch is an interesting and dynamic piece and very foundational for our learners with deafblindness. Important types of touch. There's that nurturing touch, and that's that touch that we had. That's how we develop it. It's that nurturing that we had as newborns, as babies, as toddlers, that people would touch you, they'd pat you on the head, they pat you on the back, all those different kinds of nurturing touches. It provides that comfort, that sense of base, which then helps that student with deafblindness to be able to feel more confident in exploring and to educate. We've got to, we foster it. We help it along. We work with them to just become curious. That's one of the things that I think struck me the most when I started working with kids with deafblindness, is how much I had to teach them to be curious. And just to be willing to explore, to be willing to go out and do that extra thing, because I was right there with them to help them explore it together. The other types of touch are meaningful. It has significance. Maybe it's that no, and I'm pushing them away. Those touch cues that we use, those things that help us, those purpose. It may have purpose or value to that person being touched. We may use those touch cues as we're diapering someone. We may touch them on their belly and say, I'm going to take your diaper now, or come on, and maybe touch their bottom a little bit and say, okay, I need you to raise up a little and help me, or touch their hands to let them know I'm expecting something from you. So all of those touches are those meaningful touches. They're purposeful. They're the ones that we use to let them know what's going to happen next. Those touch cues we use in different parts of the body and different ways to help people to know exactly what's going to happen immediately next. They're very quick. So I'm going to do that touch. It's going to let them know, I need you to move your hand. I need you to do this. I need you to move your body. I need you to open your mouth because I'm going to feed you. All of those different types of touch cues that we might use. They're meaningful, they're significant to that person. With students with deaf blindness, touch is key for accessing information. They have to have that. We have to help them. We also have to help them with hand development, because hand development takes a lot of practice. We don't think about that as much with sighted kids because they're using their sight and they're also using their touch in the same time, both of those are developing. But with our kids with deaf blindness, we've got to help them get from here. Remember how I said from here to be able to go out and then able shaping into signs and doing different things like that. So we've got to help them with that hand development and even learning how to use their sense of touch and how to explore with touch. It takes lots and lots of practice of them doing it over and over again and working with it and playing with it and then sorting it out in their minds. We have to teach them how to explore and be curious. You know, a lot of times we'll put perimeters around so that they do feel, oh, here's this tray and all of the things that I need to have are right there. And I've got a little place that I know that if I explore all in that area, it's safe for me. Because if you imagine not having your vision, not having your hearing, and then just going out in that world, it's a very scary world out there. It's a scary world on any day. But without your vision and hearing, and not with someone who's right there beside you, kind of coaxing you and teaching you and showing you how to be safe in this world, then yeah, you have to teach them how to explore, how to be curious, how to have those perimeters that it's okay. I'm going to be safe if my stuff that I need is right here. Or I can maybe even reach out to the side of me and find out who's beside me, what's going on. Having that hand development is crucial, and playing with those hands and getting them, it's a crucial part of language development. If we're going to get them to the place where they're using either, if it's tactile cues or even sign language or whatever they're going to be using, ASL, however they're going to use it, they're going to be using their hands. So it's crucial that we teach them how to do that and how to use it. And it starts with that play, that exploration, that going on, that practice over and over and over again. Tactile learners need to develop specific skills. They have to have those skills to feel the unique differences of what each tactile representation is. So not only do they need to learn how to shape their hands and do their hands, they also have to know how to discriminate between something that's scratchy or something that's smooth or something that's whatever the different bumpy, whatever different textures, so that when we're using tactile representation and in a calendar system or whatever, when we're using those things with them, then they're able to discriminate the difference between one thing and one object and another. And that's key. And it very much relies on their sense of touch. Common experiences with touch unless we really know what we're doing beforehand, and a lot of times we don't. A lot of times these kids come to us and we've had no prior experience with kids with deaf blindness or with a kid with whatever. It's, whatever our college has taught us and whatever limited experience or maybe vast experience that we've had working with kids. If we don't have any background in working with kids with deaf blindness, and we haven't been necessarily trained. I know I wasn't. No one ever talked about it when I was going through college back in the dark ages. What I learned about deaf blindness, I had to learn pretty much on my own, plus using all of my team members and really learning from them different aspects. Fortunately, before I ever started working with kids with deaf blindness, I worked with an OT on another child, another student who he wasn't deaf blind, but I learned so much about sensory integration from working with this student. So from learning that, it really made the difference when I did get that learner with deaf blindness, because I did know about that all the sensory systems and how they need to be integrated within the body for a kid to be able to function properly. So it really, I was blessed in having that prior background before I ever worked with a kid with deaf blindness. But even when I did start working with them, I didn't know. I didn't know what I was doing, So a lot of what happens, and when I go out and I've been in, oh gosh, I guess I've been in thousands of different classrooms all over the country and seeing all kinds of kids, all different types of kids, from way up academic to where they have very limited mobility and everything in between. So, but what common experiences for a lot of our kids with deaf blindness is they've been pulled around a lot, grabbed by the arm and pushed and pulled and taken and done. And some of them will go this way, and others have learned helplessness and learned to be passive because they don't know, they've given up the fight and just, okay, if you say I have to go there, then that's what I'm going to do. A lot of times they're not given a warning that they're about to be touched. That's why I say that arm on the shoulder, that just letting them know I'm in your space. First, I'm going to come up close to them and I'm going to be near them so that they can feel me. They can feel that I'm near them. And then before I ever touch them, or before I ever start to engage, I might watch them or just get close, let them get used to me being there before I just dive in. But what we usually do is we don't stop and think about that trust. We don't stop and think about their prior experiences, or maybe they have no clue who this lady is or what she's about to do to me. And so what happens is we just go in and we have our mindset on what we have to do to get through our day. And oh yeah, I've got to work with this kiddo. And I go in and immediately start working with them and dive right in and start acting on them. And we don't give them any warning. So one of the things that we have to do and have to be more mindful of, and especially, once again, I'm going to go back to that COVID thing and say, guys, we're going to get different learners back than what we had when they left us. I just feel that very strongly. And I think that we really have to think about these kind of things as we're moving forward. We have to not act on them like that. We have to let them know what's about to happen next. When we let kids know what's going to happen next, it's amazing what happens and how they will follow our lead and do. But we've got to get them and we got to let them know, because you think about, if they're not given that warning, then they get that startle and that shot of adrenaline goes through. And when you're in that state, you can't learn anything. You don't learn as receptively. You learn, but it's not the way it should be. the way it comes in, and you can really, if they can really put it in their mind the way it's supposed to be. It's up to us to set that up. Some of the other common experience they have is not being given enough time to process a touch or a prompt. You know, sometimes it takes a full minute for them to process. When I'm wanting them to do something, I might give them that touch cue, and then I'm going to wait. And I'm going to give them, you can watch them, you can watch their eye, their head, you can watch just, it may be a flicker of a finger, it may be whatever, it may be a tenseness of the body, whatever that is. We've got to give them that time to process what it is. What was my message to them through my sense of touch? What, and they're having to process, what did she mean by that? And sometimes we're in our own little world, and we got to get it going. We got to go. We got to get it done. I've only got 30 minutes here, and then I've got to be at the next school. So you better hurry up, kid. And we've got to stop that mentality and stop and take that time. If we take that time in the upfront, then as they get used to us, as they get used to what we're doing and how we're doing it, then if we take that time to give them the processing, to give them that time to just get it together so that they can give us something back, then as they get used to it, as they get more familiar with it, as they get the practice with it, then they're not going to need that much time to do it. But we've got to devote that front time. We've got to give it to them. Otherwise, we're not going to get anywhere with them, because they're just going to learn what we want them to do in that set moment at that set time. Kind of that Pavlov's dog kind of thing. And that's bad to say, but I think that's, you know, if we don't do that with kids, we will not get anywhere. Students may also need more wait time. Sometimes it takes that much time to get their sensory systems together and all cooperating and moving so that they can give us something. And sometimes we give our instruction just too fast for them to comprehend. We want them to do this and this and this and this, because, you know, we do have that 30 minutes. We're almost time. It's almost time for us to go. We got to go. They feel that in our bodies. They feel that through our touch. And then that stresses even more so that they're like, and it causes them to shut down. So we've got to think about how we can get our kids there. Okay, so I'm going to show you, this is a little guy, and I'm going to hope that I can get this to work. This is just a short little, yes.
There's a question in the chat box. I don't know if you want to address that before.
That'd be great, because I can't see the chat pod. So yes.
Is there a list of tactile development skills?
I'm sure there is somewhere. I will dig around. How's that? I'm sure there is. I'm sure there would be. What I would do if I were you is to go to your OT and really talk to them and have long, candid discussions. The way that I got the knowledge that I do about all of that is because the OT would come in and she would be doing things with my student, and I would go, whoa, 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 why are we doing this? Tell me what we're doing. And why do I need to do that? And she'd say, oh, well, it stimulates the proprioceptive system and and whoa, 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 whoa. I need you to bring it down. I need to know what that really means. How is this going to help? And so I would get with your OT and really talk about, and have them talk to you about, and they may have, so I bet the OTs will probably have that developmental, and they will have that information, and ask them to help you and talk about how that does and what you need to do to make that better. Did that answer your question?
Hopefully, yes, yes, thanks.
Okay. Okay, but I really would. I would rely. You have so much strength in your teams that we're not tapping into, folks. We don't tap into, I guess, looking back and thinking about my own career, that's what made me be able to sit here and talk to you today, as I relied and went to my team members and said, yo, teacher of the visually impaired, I don't know anything about vision. Talk to me about, how does this apply? What does this do with this kid? How does this kid see? So I do that same thing with all of my different, and I was blessed with having some really, really good folks that I really thought a lot of how they conducted their business. So they will come along your path, but you got to take the time to ask them those things. You got to take the time to think about it. And with deafblind kids, working with deafblind kids, really, it's like peeling layer after layer after layer. And you have to think about these things. You have to, like today, we're talking about touch. So now unpack touch and think about touch and really think about how that works within you, how it applies to your own body, how it applies to your own way you do things. Look at your other kids, look at your other students, look at your own kids, look at different folks, and then how does this apply? Because that's how this helps you to really understand. I truly have thought all along, if you can teach a kid with deaf blindness, you can teach anybody, because all of those sensory systems have to work together, and you have to know about all of those sensory systems in order for you to really know deaf blindness and know how to do it. Okay, so now I'll get off of that, and we're going to talk about hands, and look at this hands. And this is a little short clip. There's no audio to this, but I want you to watch how she's using her hands and how he's reacting to her hands. Okay. Okay. Whoop, now I gotta escape. Ah, make it stop. Now let's think about what just happened. You think about him, she's got her hand over his hand and she's patting it, she's holding it. Look at him pulling it away and putting it up. And remember what I told you about how kids with deaf blindness, they'll keep their hands tight in, right? So what's he doing? What's he doing? He's pulling that away. He's pulling that back. He's like, oh God, get out of my face. Get away from me, right? She's trying to get him to bang on the drum and play with that and have fun with it. But if you think about it, she's using hand over hand. And that's been something that we've always used, hand over hand. I'm going to have this child do this, and I'm going to use hand over hand. When you use hand over hand, that feels so different. And when somebody puts their hand on top of yours and then forces it in something, and especially if you don't have the vision or your vision is limited, and they're forcing it into something to do an action like that, first of all, they've got your hand clamped down. So that feels bizarre. And then they're pushing it into something where you don't know what they want, where it's going and all that. So it's a very natural thing for him to stress out and put his hands up here, because that is stressful for him. He didn't know what that meant. He didn't know why he was doing it. He's doing it. She's very nonchalantly doing something that would be a typical thing that you would do, but she's using her hand over hand. And if you think about how when somebody grabs your hand and does that, it's so unnatural to you. It feels bizarre. And then your first instinct is that pull away, is to make it stop, make it go away and push. Okay, so now I'm going to try to get out of this, which sometimes it works and sometimes. All right. So I came up with this, and it's establishing a trusting relationship where touch is turned into interactions and interactions turn into conversations. And when you're first starting to work with or interact with that student, when you're first really thinking about touch and how that flows with all of this and how you're trying to educate this child, you really do have to start with that trusting relationship. It starts with that, and that starts with your touch. When I go into work with kids, the very first thing I do is take one big, huge, giant breath and think about, clear everything else out of my mind. And when I go in to work with a student, when I'm there, then everything else is gone. It is just the two of us. And I don't care what kind of day I've had before that. And lots of times it's not been the best, in teaching school, you're always on the run. You're always putting out brush fires. Mind is going 3,000 miles an hour. But when I work with kids with deaf blindness, I've trained myself over the years to stop, take that deep breath, and clear me so that when I touch them, they're not feeling all of my whatever that I've been through before I got to them, because it's going to come through there. They're going to feel that. It comes through just like what it does if you were to look at my face. Your touch is really going to be showing. So when I'm doing that touch, I'm going to start that touch, and I want it to go into interactions. I want us to do that turn taking, because what happens with turn taking? Turn taking turns into then communication and into conversation. But that touch, we start there with that touch and those interactions and going back and forth. Okay, so when we're teaching skills that facilitate hand development and expressiveness, and this goes back to the question a little bit, and these are some of the things that you want to think about. We're going to watch or touch the students' hands and learn to read them. So instead of looking, what we do mostly when we're observing, we're looking at their eyes, we're looking at their faces, we're looking at all that. When you're looking with deaf-blind kids, you look at their hands. You watch their hands and learn how to read them. Learn when they're feeling stressed. Learn when they're anxious. Learn when they're tight. So you're learning how they feel that way. Learn when they're relaxed. Learn when they're curious. Some kids will give you kind of these kind of emotions that are like, I want to know more. So learn what those feel like. Learn what they're doing with their hands. You're going to be watching them, and you're going to be touching those hands. Touching those hands and feeling if they're feeling tense and tight, or if they're feeling, and you can feel when they're, tell me more, tell me more. I want to know more. I want to learn more. You're going to do that all through the sense of touch. When you think of your hands as the initiators of topics in conversational interactions. So if I have a kid that is sitting there and they're doing this, then I'm going to use this, and we're going to talk all about this through our hands. And might put my hands where I'm over their hands so I can feel what they're doing. I might even do part of it myself. I might put my hand there so that we're starting those conversations. They're conversation on a coaster, but I've had worse conversations. I've had great conversations with all kinds of deafblind kids over all kinds of weird things. The student I had loved cookie sheets. It was that cold metal, but she spent a lot of time in a hospital bed. So cold metal was her friend. It was something that she really liked. She talked about in her conversations because it was something that was very familiar to her. We're going to use hand under hand touch to respond to exploration or to initiate topics. And we're going to get into hand under hand in just a few minutes. We're going to see some videos and talk about those in much greater detail. I'm going to always make my hands available for the child to use as he or she wishes. So I'm always going to have my hands. They may not be touching that child. They may be within an inch or two of them, but they're going to know that they're there. They're going to know I'm going to have them out like this a lot of times. Sometimes I'll have them this way, but a lot of times it's this way with them open so that they are able to see she's a willing conversational. She's open, she's ready. They may use my hand to put it into something, to get something they want, because that way they're using my hand, my body as a tool instead of using their own hands to grab it. They know that it's safer if I do it. So they may do that. They may really start using my hands. I'm also going to imitate their hand actions. My hands under theirs. So if they are doing this, I may go up under and do the same thing. We're going to do that interactive game playing back and forth. We're going to play little hand games. That's getting them back and forth. That is communication, folks. That's how you start communication, is getting those little hand movements, getting that back and forth, getting those frequently, having fun with them so that they're getting to know, oh, this is how I can get in touch with the world. Then I'm going to make those environmental provisions to encourage that hand activity. I'm going to make sure that they know how to use things and use tools and manipulate them. Remember, if you don't have your vision, then you don't know how to play with things. You don't know how to manipulate things. You don't know how to hold a spoon. You don't know how to cut with scissors. All of those things happen. Most of those things happen with us watching and observing others. That's how we learned how to do it. With our kids with deaf blindness, we have to show them and make sure that we have those to encourage them to use those hands and use activities, do activities where it encourages their hands. We're going to encourage energetic throwing things, the balls or different things so that they can see what their hands can do and how they can do things in different ways. We invite our access to our hands while they're engaged in a variety of activities. So as I'm doing something, as I'm mixing in a bowl, or if I'm picking up my pencil, or if I'm using scissors, I'm going to let that child feel what I'm doing. And that's all with hand under hand, which we're going to talk about. I'm going to invite them to feel how I do it. That's how they're going to know how their hand is supposed to be shaped and what they're supposed to do with their hand in order to get it done. So if they have those scissors, how they're supposed to put their hands into the scissors and to open and shut their hands in order to make those scissors go. I'm going to invite that person to have frequent tactile access to the environment. I want them to know that they're able to explore. I want them to feel that, but I have to set up that environment so that they do feel safe enough to do that. So I have to make sure that that environment is safe, they're not going to get hurt, and that they are going to then be able to open their mind to explore and to be open to learning. Then I'm going to model whatever hand skills that I wish the child to acquire to allow that tactile access to modeling. So I'm going to, whatever they need to know how to do, I'm going to give them lots and lots of modeling, but I'm also going to give them lots of practice in doing that. And I'm going to make language accessible to the hands of the student. I want to make sure that they know that there is language with this, that it's embedded in there. And also become aware of your own hands. Just thinking about your own hands and that they do carry your feelings, and just what kind of pragmatic functions you use your hands for, and how you use your hands. The more you think about your own hands and the more you think about the way that you use your hands, then the stronger you're going to understand your student with deafblindness and what it is they need to know and how they need to know to manipulate their world. Okay. So, what is hand under hand? Hand under hand is a technique that's an essential strategy for providing direct learning experiences for students who are deafblind. So what that is, if you'll look, you see Megan is the teacher here, and she's slicing a kiwi with a knife. And her learner with deafblindness is right beside her. She's got her hand on top of Megan's, and she's feeling as Megan is slicing the kiwi. She's feeling that motion that she uses as she's cutting through. And sometimes when you're cutting through, you're using this motion, or you might use this motion depending, but she's feeling what that feels like and how Megan's hand is shaped around the knife. She's feeling just all the tenseness that's in her hand. Her other hand is not on Megan's other that's holding the kiwi, but it looks like this young lady has enough vision that she's seeing that. If not, she might put her other hand on top of Megan's other hand. The nice thing about hand underhand is you're doing the motions and the child is able to come in and out with their comfort level. And it involves placing my hand underneath their student's hand as you explore and do things together. So see, as they're cutting that kiwi, they're doing it together. They're able to share that experience. So they're having a mutual experience where they're both learning about how you cut a kiwi and what you do with it. Okay, so hand under hand allows the student access to the ways people use their hands. The student can experience hands in relationship to one another, including direction of movement. So maybe it's that cutting, and I'm doing it this way. Maybe it's the amount of force. If it's something that takes a little bit more for me to chop through, then I might use more force. The speed or the tempo. And those are the things that we take for granted so much because we don't think about, we just go about our business. We use our hands like tools. So we constantly are using our hands, we're doing things with them, and we never give it any thought. For our students with deafblindness, in order for them to understand what it is we want them to do, they have to know all about that. How to use their hands, how we want them to move it, what kind of force, how much pressure do they put on, how fast do they do it, how slow. So all of those things are so vital. It provides the person who is blind or has low vision with a spatial awareness through the tactile experience. So spatially, they then know how to and are able to explore through our hands, through using our hands and understanding how that moves. It encourages that authentic involvement of the student in those routine tasks that they cannot yet perform independently. Like I said, I've been doing a lot of work with different teams around the country. And we're talking about, especially with parents at home who are working with their kids, and they have the school system who's calling in and giving them things to do, and they're doing Zoom. So you guys understand and know that drill. But in that, I've talked a lot to the parents about like bathing routines and using their routines and stuff, and really embedding those routines. And one of the routines that parents always come up with, and we talk about a lot, are the bathing routine. And they talk about, yes, I put them here and I do this and I do that. And then I talk to them about, well, what about turning off and on the water? And just having that sense and that control of being able to turn that water on and then feel that water that's coming out, because a lot of these kids also are those same kids that are tactfully defensive, and they love playing in the pool or in the bathtub, but they hate getting their hands washed. So this is a way for them to have that control of really understanding, oh, if I turn this knob, that also goes into that concept development of knowing cause and effect. If I do this, this happens. If I do this, it stops. So them knowing, but they're feeling it through my hand. They're feeling it by that mama's hand while she's turning the water on. And then they're feeling with the other hand as she's guiding it to show them, this is where the water comes out. Here's where the plug is. This is how the water gets in the tub. Because a lot of times when we teach through routines, we do those routines, but we don't stop to think about the whole routine. We just think about the routine that we have already set up. And so many of these parents, and I get it, I so get it, they're just trying to get it done. But in order for our kids to really, truly understand and know, they've got to be part of all the routine. And that involves how that water get in there in the first place. So using their hands and helping them to feel and feel how it goes, it really does, it's empowering. And hopefully one day, as they learn more and more about it, then it becomes something that they can perform independently, that they can start learning how to turn that bath water on, how to put the plug in, how to take that bath by themselves, all of those things, because isn't that what we're trying for in the long run? We want these kids to be as independent as possible. And it starts there. It starts with us teaching them the whole part of that and using their hands and how to use their hands. When we use hand under hand too, it stimulates curiosity about what's around them and increases the desire to do things for themselves. It reduces that passivity and dependence. And so many of our kids have learned helplessness. They've learned to be passive because it is safer here. It's so much safer here. And we go in and we do for them and we act on them so many times without even thinking about it. So we have to stop and give them that. And I told you I've been in lots of classrooms and met lots of kids. And when I do that, I have to work on building that trust with them immediately. It's building that trusting relationship, something that I think takes a little bit of time, but because I only have, an hour or so to spend with these folks, then I've got to get down in that floor and establish that pretty quickly. When I'm using hand under hand, which I always do with these kiddos, as I'm doing this, I don't care which kid it is and how many whatevers, I always feel them coming back. They come back and naturally start putting their hand there. As soon as they learn that what I'm doing with them, that I'm in control, I'm doing it, but they're along for that ride. They're along to read that and feel what I'm doing. And they can put their hand there and then they can put their hand out as much as they want, or they may slip it under and make my hand on top. But that makes that curiosity happen. And that's what we're after. That's what we want. We want them to be curious. We want them to be able to feel like they have enough control now that they can explore and feel their environment and feel what's going on. So it increases, I can't tell you how many kids that they immediately then start, they don't know what it is. They don't know why, but they start seeking that hand and they start seeing that, oh, your hands are going to teach me something. Your hands are going to tell me something. You have a message for me. We're going to do something. And usually it involves some kind of play. So we're going to do something and it's going to be fun. And we're going to laugh and giggle because that's how I roll. So they're going to go in and they want to be curious. They want to do it and they want to see what else, what's next, what's going to happen next. But it starts with that curiosity and it starts with me showing them with my hand what it is we're going to do. It also prepares them for tactile signing by teaching the student to learn to reach for that communication. When I was working in Kentucky, when I was teaching my child with deaf blindness, she would always put her hands up. She would put her hands immediately up for hours. But then when she had something to say, she'd flip it and she had to have our hands on top of hers. And that's because she didn't have vision. She didn't know that we could see her hands. She wanted to know that we were there for her and that we understood, we were listening to her. So sometimes our hands serve as listeners. These are ears in that case for our kids with deaf blindness, because I'm listening, I'm ready for you. I want to be a communication partner with you. Okay, so some points to remember. Too much touch distracts the brain. So when we talk about doing hand under hand and we talk about touch, then you don't want to do it this way where you're all over them and you're okay, I'm going to really, and I'm also going to stroke your face while I'm doing this, because too much of that, then they shut down because they can't take it all. So you want to be very purposeful with that. Also, too much talking distracts. So I'm not going to do a lot of verbiage. When I am working with deafblind kids, I use my voice, I use my tone, because it paces me also. It helps me to keep my pace. And then I'm looking at that child, I'm watching that child, and I'm really going to put my tone, my pace, and I'm going to match it to their tone. So if it's a laid back guy and he's a slow, I call it the rhythm of the child. You get into that rhythm of however their flow is. And I'm also going to do that same thing with my talking. I'm going to slow it down. Some kids, I only use just the words to get us to where we're move cup or whatever. So I'm going to use just a few words, because I don't want to distract that. Because if I'm talking and I've got all that going on plus touching, then they're going to be like this and they'll shut down on you. So I'm going to really slow my roll. I'm going to provide the student with daily observation time. So that's that observation where they're going to use their hands as their eyes. Even if they have some vision, I'm going to give them that practice, that time for them to observe, for them to use their hands. I'm going to keep both of their hands engaged on mine throughout the task if I can. And especially at first, I may make that brief task that we're doing until they start really understanding that this is giving them information, that they're with me, and that what I'm doing is teaching them how to use whatever these things are. I'm going to always start with something they like. So it's the things that they like, those interactions that they like, but I'm going to start there. And this kind of teaching is that active participation in active learning. When we have our little guys that are so tactually defensive, we've got to really be careful of that and a lot of times, once they start realizing what it is that we're doing, you'll find that they're not as defensive as you first thought, because then they start realizing what it is they're going to use and why we have these things. I worked with one student one time, and we were doing what's called an arena assessment, and that's where all the everybody comes from all different disciplines, and they watch the child do an activity or a series of activities, and they're putting in their 2 cents worth. Try this, try that, have you done that? And they figure out what the student is doing, how they're using their vision, how they're using their hands, how they're using different things. And then they write a report, and that serves as kind of a 3-year eval. Anyway, so I was serving as the intervener person or the person that was guiding this young man through these activities that we had set up. And I'd never met this young man, but when I got there, his hands were up here he had an Afghan that his mom had made, and he kept his hands tight into those. And he wasn't going to let go of that. That was not an option. And it stayed behind his head, and he kept his hands like this, very, very tight. But his feet were out, and his feet were ready. We started signing with his feet, and then I kind of started going up his body, and little by little through the course of the day, and working with the OT, hand in hand with the OT. And we did a lot of going in and then giving him time to process, and then going in and giving him time to process. So it was kind of a dance that we did all day to get him. Finally, by about mid-afternoon, we started at 8, and this was about 1:30 or so. We finally got the Afghan off of his hands, and we got him into weighted gloves, because he didn't even know that these were attached to his body. And so that made so much difference for him. But that took a lot of time and a lot of really understanding and knowing, working with that OT, because she was the one that knew what to do. I knew what to do with him. I needed her to guide me for that, because I'm not an OT, so I don't understand. But we were able to get him to a place where his hands weren't as sensitive to me, and able to communicate and using them. So sometimes it's because they don't even know that these are attached to them, or several other things can go in. That's why you really do need to work with that OT. Okay, so now we're going to watch a couple of things. Excuse me. We're going to watch some videos. And this is Sean and Grandpa. And Sean is, he's just playing in here with Grandpa a little bit. You see, Grandpa's hands are underneath.
He's reaching for your hands. He wants your hands there.
See, he's reaching out.
Get your hands, Grandpa.
It's huge for him reaching out. He wants that interaction. He wants to play with Grandpa. You see how Grandpa's across from him, and they're just having a little hand play. They're just playing. That's part of an engagement of, look, Grandpa, you and I have something to talk about. That's also that trusting relationship. They're establishing that mutual attention. Their attention, both of them, attention is on the same thing. Whoop, there we go. Okay. All right. This is little William, and he's with his mom. And they're doing, notice mom is, he's about 18 months old, and he's got his hands, mom's hands are under his, mom's thumbs. He's holding mom's thumbs.
cake, had cake, bake cake, man.
See how she's
Bake
slowing?
me a cake as fast as you can. Roll it.
She's waiting for him. He's
Have
actually
it.
doing some of the movements.
With the
He's
W.
using her
So
hands
put it
and
in
he's moving her. He's
there.
manipulating. He's figuring it out.
Huh.
He's also cute, stinking
Had
cute.
cake, bake cake.
Hey, Nancy,
Yes,
this is Jen. Just wondering, we initially scheduled this 3 to 4:30. Were you planning,
Oh.
how late were you planning on?
I thought it was 3 to 5.
Okay,
Oops.
if everybody is okay to maintain, I mean, we can keep going, but we need to check with our current interpreter to make sure that she can stay because the other one needs to leave.
Okay, if not, then I can I can go through this. I'm sorry. I
All
had 3
good,
to
as long as people are available, those who are available to stay, would like to stay, we can keep going.
Okay. Well, this one is very, very short, but this is a child also with more limited mobility, and watch how she uses. Better.
57 now.
See how she used her hands to guide her over, and then she was doing it, strumming it, but then she also was helping. And then one more video, and then gosh, I'm sorry, I thought 3 to 5.
In there, but I mean something that would like a metal
What
ball
is
or
food?
golf balls, you know, golf balls
Right.
are good, like golf balls.
Let us go.
I have a squeaky
Yeah,
toy.
she put the thing down
Put a
there,
squeaky toy in
and
there. You
then
want to
she's
feel my
going
squeaky
under
toy?
her hand.
You want to feel my squeaky toy? Yes, that's a squeaky toy. I'm going to put it in there.
And she's like, I don't know about this.
Okay.
Wait a minute.
You have two things in there now. Look, you have that. You have the whisk. And you have the squeaky toy. They're all in there.
And she's still not sure, but then wait a minute. That could become some fun. So they gave her enough information and gave her, whoops, whoa. I don't know what happened. Sorry about that. Here, we'll start here. Okay, so with hand under hand, you can teach topics, you can teach skills, and you can teach concepts through all of these. But it's important for you to think it through and think about how you do that using your hands. And it really, at first, it feels kind of foreign, but then once you do it, it's one of the most natural things you'll ever do, and you'll never go without doing hand under hand again, because it feels so good, and you see the power of it. You see the power from the student and how they respond. And it's probably one of the most powerful techniques that you can use with kids with deafblindness that help them really understand. It's important to use those objects and activities that you know that the student really likes, that provide that motivation and interest for him at first. Once you do that, then from there, you can springboard onto other things. Then where do you position yourself? There are several different ways that you can do that. You can do it where you're next to each other, like Megan was with the Kiwi. They were beside each other. You can be across, like where Grandpa was with the little boy, or you can, or across from them, or I have this wrong. They can be in front of you. So if it's a small child, you would have them almost in your lap or in a chair in front of you, and you're behind them so that you're coming through with both of your hands under theirs and you're helping them, because what that also does for small children, that's giving them what their whole body should be doing. So if you are, let's say, mixing in a bowl and you have that bowl and you're doing it this way, and they're feeling how your hand should move around and hold the bowl with this hand, and as this hand I'm going to use to stir. So if I'm using them and I have them in front of me, and I think that's the most natural when they're young and smaller and the body size is smaller. Here are the 10 top reasons to use hand under hand. The hands of the deafblind student are their eyes and their ears. We need to remember that. And then it provides opportunities to learn about the ways that people use their hands, because different people use their hands in different ways. It promotes that exploration. It helps build self-determination. You know, when they start creeping over your hands and they start doing it for themselves, not only can that build that determination and I can do this, but it also builds that independence. It helps them to take the initiative. Sometimes they'll take your hand and pull it there, and then they'll slide their hand so that they're having you do it and show them. So that's that curiosity. They're taking that initiative. It promotes that active learning and starts to learn new skills, and then provides that access to communication and language, like I said, and provides just access to the world. So with that, I'm going to end it because you said I want to be respectful of your all's time too. So do we have any questions? Do I still even have anybody here?
Yes, we still have about 25 people still on.
Yay.
I don't see any
So
questions at the moment, but maybe some are coming in. While we're thinking of questions, I'm going to launch the poll for our evaluation. If everybody that's still here could please complete that for us.
Oh, and look. So Susie, Mara, thanks.
Nancy, are you seeing the questions in the chat box?
I am.
Okay. Do you see that there's a question?
I don't see any questions. Why was the little girl rocking her head back and forth? Sorry. I don't know which little girl. Oh, the baby sitting on the floor. Is that the one? The blonde with the mixing bowl. I think that she was probably, that's that comfort thing. That's that comfort thing. Did you notice she put her hand in there and then she pull it back? And that was kind of that, I don't know about this, but then I need to go back in. And from what I saw of that video, I don't know this little girl, but from what I saw, it looked like she was pretty well versed. They had been doing this more than one time with her. So she knew that what they were doing, how they were showing her, I do feel like she was ready to explore. Any other questions?
Also, if people are looking for additional information on this topic, the New York DeafBlind Project is hosting a webinar on the 23rd of this month on using the tactile threshold model to develop the communication skills.
Awesome. Way to go, Susie.
And we will advertise that in our newsletter coming up next week. So be sure to check our newsletter for that, as well as other upcoming trainings, webinars, resources, etc.
You're exactly right that she could be seeking vestibular input. Whoa, whoa, way to go, OTs in the house. Thank you for being here. Yes, the slides on the PowerPoint are available. I think they'll send them out. I don't know.
Yes, we can send those out.
And I can send you the videos version one if you want, but
That might be harder to send out, just such a large file.
yes, I will be happy. I will put my email address here. Yeah, that's it. And it's also going to be on the same, on my email address is also on the first slide.